So there's different ways we can view network thinking. Part of it is network thinking as a mindset. So can we teach students kind of the skill to like conceptualize things in terms of network terms to get that kind of like network bug in their system where they're thinking about the world, or when they see social relationships or systems, being able to conceptualize that as networks and bring that mindset to the world. That's one point of view. We can also think about network thinking as an activity, as a deliberate process where people may reflect on their networks, reflect on the networks of those around them, and think about what is their role in the system and how can they sort of enact changes or be more deliberate agents in their social networks. So that's thinking about networks as a deliberate activity. And the third kind of analogy I'll use for how we want to teach network thinking is kind of as a skill or muscle. It's something that hopefully with interactive teaching exercises, we can give people more practice with by either applying it to hypothetical scenarios or also applying it to their own lives and helping people build that skill that they can later apply in future scenarios or situations. Um, so we're going to demo various interactive teaching exercises that we've used in the past. Um, a lot of these exercises we started as part of Nashir's lab at Northwestern, the Sonic Research Group. We started developing most of them pre-COVID, but especially like during the pandemic, during this shift to remote teaching, these exercises became really useful and a really great way to sort of engage students, get them involved in active learning, and help them really take the concepts that we would cover in courses and kind of translate them into practice. So hopefully these will be a great battery of teaching exercises that you can apply both in in-person, remote, or hybrid courses. And as we think about them, these teaching exercises are going to cover a range of different levels, from more conceptual things about applying network concepts in abstract scenarios or understanding big picture principles of networks, to a more practical range of the spectrum, where it will start to get students thinking about how do networks apply in actual organizations or organizational processes, and getting people in the mindset to start thinking of how networks directly apply to their own day-to-day lives and their own choices that they can make in the workplace or outside of the workplace. So that's kind of the goal, and to think about these activities as having a range of different use cases on this conceptual practical spectrum. Um, so I put a shortened link here in the slides. This is to go to the workshop handout. I believe I also sent it out over email this morning. So that should have gone to everyone in the session. So this handout's going to have links that go to the slides. And this link also takes you to the workshop handout. So that will have like a summary of the materials and the agenda for today. We're also excited to launch an awesome list for resources on teaching about networks. If you're not familiar, the awesome list format is sort of a recent trend where there's these sort of curated list of resources about different topics that are often hosted on GitHub, and they allow community contributions. So people are able to like collect and curate this list of helpful resources on a topic. That's what the awesome list format is. So we're very excited to be launching one, or soft launching one at this workshop today. So it's brand new. We created one for teaching resources about networks. On this list, we're going to have links to all the teaching exercises that we cover today, as well as we're going to start gathering and compiling and sharing resources for other teaching exercises, or generally any form of helpful resources for teaching about networks. So that's linked here, as well as in the slides and in the worksheet handout. So if you have any like resources yourself you want to suggest to others or add to the list, feel free to do so either with a GitHub commit or by emailing us directly if that's easier. But we're excited to be able to like sort of soft launch this today. We haven't like shared this link really on the web yet, but we're hoping to shortly after the workshop. And yeah, with this workshop, you can be kind of the first people to get a look at this list and start adding to it. So hopefully that will help build more of a community and help distribute great resources with everyone. Yeah, so today's objective is to kind of go through these different exercises one by one. So we'll present each of them, and hopefully you can leave with potentially useful exercises that you might be able to apply, whether it's in teaching, in courses, whether it's in workshops, and hopefully that's something you can take away. The final note is ask questions as we go. We save some time for Q&A at the ending, and we'll try to ask questions after each presentation, but also feel free to interject. We're excited to have discussions on these topics, and feel free to ask questions at any point throughout this 3-hour workshop. Thank you. So the first presentation is going to be Kioske, and he's going to be presenting and also demoing the 6 degrees of separation activity.
Thanks, Brian. And then I'm going to switch to my slide. So the first, we introduce what we call the 6 dots, 6 degrees of separation. This is a networking exercise, and it's a very short-term in-class exercise. And basically, the idea is that students or participants can interact in a network routing task, and which is great to introduce some of the classic network concepts like a milligram small experiments, or illustrate the role of networking in information sharing or communication, and tries the process of building network awareness. That's a concept we are pushing through it. So this is just a key summary of, I'm just gonna move this one, all right. Summary of what this tool is capable of. So this exercise is pretty much maybe because of the nature of task, maybe 10 people as a minimum, and then we tested around 200. So if you have a big lecture, you can still utilize this tool, and both you can use this tool as asynchronous or synchronous settings, and also both in-class and out-class exercise. Just if you just want to conduct milligrams small experiment, then you can use as asynchronous in multiple days. While if you're using in a class, maybe just 30 minutes exercise. And then if you can highlight using these tools to teach networks, networking, social capital, and then also organization learning. So you used to be at the Kellogg, and Smith used this tool pretty much, and then he had this session called Learning Organization, and highlighting how the organizational structure accommodate information flows and information sharing and information overload and so on. So, which is another capability of using this tool. And then another point is cognitive social structure. David Crawford at CMU often use these tools to illustrate how people not only knowing about their networks directly, but also indirectly, who knows whom, and also who knows whom, which is kind of the idea of network awareness. And then the target audience of this tool is pretty much undergrad, graduate student, and also executive trainings. So some of the serious executive training classes, people use these tools to kind of simulate the situation of information sharing and communication in the small teams and organizations. And we have YouTube videos for intro, for player instructions, as well as instructors how to set up sessions, as well as we have slide decks, so that's free to use. And then these tools, basically, there is no preparation for students. In class, you just explain or use the YouTube video to tell students how to play this session. And then exercise takes to about 15 minutes to 30 minutes. It depends on how many rounds you're gonna play with these tools. Just one round, maybe 15 minutes, very quick. And then if you have multiple rounds, maybe it takes 20 to 30 minutes. Once students know how to use it, it's very easy because students know what to do, so it doesn't take much time. And then after finishing sessions, you have a debrief maybe takes like 15 to 30 minutes, depends on how exclusively or extensively you explain the results. So that's pretty much I'm gonna demo today. But before going deep dive into the tools, I'm just gonna tell you the way of using 6DOTS for teaching. There are 2.5 ways to use these tools. One is a scenario simulation, such as 6 degrees of separation. And the second use is onboarding or ice-breaking activities. Actually, some of my undergraduate students, after graduating, they started working for company. They use this tool for some of the onboarding training sessions or team meeting, because the nature of interacting and then kind of visualize, who knows whom or who has a connection to whom. So it's a good activity to do that. And then finally, oh, yes.
Could you give the, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Can you give us the address again for the?
We can just put it, yeah, we should have put it on every page as part of the Bitly address, I think.
Oh.
Is it for the workshop materials or for just this?
Just this, whatever you want us to use, because if you want us to interact.
Yeah, I mean, the slides are available. Hold on a second.
Let's make sure we have that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get an email, but you mentioned it.
Yeah, we can get.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There's a Bitly link for this handout.
There's a Bitly link.
Yeah.
Handout too.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was Brennan? Do you remember the Bitly link for?
Is it the TeachNet one that you just gave, or is that a different one?
Yeah. Hold on a second.
Okay, from Brendan and
Okay, I found it. Bitly net hand.
okay, he sent us do we do teaching deck or?
Yeah, teaching deck 1. That's I'm going through it right now.
Bitly.
Oh yeah. Net hand. NETHAND. Yep. All right. So now I'm going back. Yeah. If you have any questions, just interrupt me. And then finally, so at the end of this exercise, you can actually download some of the data. For example, who chose whom, or who related to whom. So if you want to develop some lab exercise and collect like a real student data, this might be the way to use this tool as well. So today I'm just going through the next 20 minutes how Noshir and I typically introduce these tools, so that you can see how we position these tools. So we introduced these tools to introduce the concept of what are the 6 degrees of separation. So the concept of 6 degrees of separation is anyone in the wall is connected by any other person by 6 degrees. And that's why we say like it's a small world. And this concept was proven by the Sandy Milgram's classic small world experiments, where 290 starters located in Omaha. At that time, Omaha was considered as the edge of the world from Boston. Can you believe it? And the task is that these 290 starters receive the packets saying that, oh, this packet needs to go to Trevor, who is a stockbroker in Boston. And the task is that they need to send this packet to a person who is on the first name basis. So, for example, I cannot send it to someone, for example, Elon Musk, because I don't know Elon as a first basis as a friend. So maybe I need to send it to Jasmine, and Jasmine send it to Noshir, and Noshir might know someone who might connect to Elon. So that's kind of the steps going through, and then eventually 44 package received to the Trevor and a completion rate of 15%. And then when we look at the 44 messages, there is a distribution of steps went through to the Trevor. And then on average, that was 6 degrees of separation. And then usually we give students this type of engaging quiz afterwards. which is a firing effect. 60% of transmission pass through the 4 people, and then we asked what are the professions of these people. For the sake of time, just give you an answer right now. So it's a trick question because there are 2 travel salesmen in the answer. And then also, if you go to the more pop culture reference, you can talk about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, and which was developed by the 3 college students. So they have parties and then watch the 2 of the Kevin Bacon's movies, and then they thought that Kevin Bacon is the center of the Hollywood. And it turned out he wasn't. So 2015, the top one is Eric Roberts. Anyone knows Eric Roberts?
Rather than feeling.
Exactly, yeah. And then Kevin Bacon is at 441st place. So he is not the center in Hollywood. And then fast forward 2017, probably everybody used Facebook, or I don't know anymore, but Facebook looked at the 2 billion users, and then what they found was that on average in the Facebook, people are 4 degrees of separation instead of 6 degrees of separation. However, this approach has a problem because what we call the topological view, basically Facebook has got idea of the networks, and then they try to find algorithmically the shortest path towards every person. But in reality, you need to navigate the networks. It's a different task because smaller experiment, people had a local idea of what the network structure looks like, but they don't have a global idea of network structure looks like. That's basically introduced as this idea of network aphorisms, which is networks is not about what you know, it's about who you know. And then cognitive social networks is about, it's not who you know, it's about who they think you know. And if you keep expanding, the knowledge network is about not who you know, it's what they think you know. And that's introduced these imaginary social networks where you have 3 connections, Jim, Dorothy, and Sarah. And then the question now is, how can you message Jacob using one of your direct contacts? And then just imagine, you're imagining this type of networks, right? So you have direct connection, Jim, Dorothy, and Sarah, and then you perceive there are indirect connections from Dorothy to Jacob, and then Dorothy to Amia, and so on. But in reality, maybe Jim doesn't have a connection to Dorothy, and also Dorothy doesn't have a connection to Michael, but Jim and Sarah might have a connection which you not perceive it. So we introduced the concept called network awareness, which is defined as to what extent you have a precise knowledge of the network you belong to. So now, if you are going through this task of routing a message to Jacob, you have 3 options. The first option is you use Sarah. And then Sarah sent it to message to Michael, and then Michael sent it to Amir, and then Amir sent it to Jacob. It takes 4 steps. Option number 2 is sending to Jim, but the Jim option is taking more steps than the Sarah option. And then most efficient path is using Dorothy because Dorothy has a direct connection to Jacob. So the question is, what is network awareness? And then what is your network awareness? So we can test that. So now we're gonna do the real quick demo. So if you have internet connections and laptop computer, can you type into the bit.ly/network task? That these 2, this 6 dots page. Yeah, I will type in as well. bit.ly and then /network task. And then once get there, just click on get started. And then ask your first name and last name and email. And if you instruct the students, it's important for them to put some recognizable first name. Some people just put like A or something, but this actually display the person's name in sessions. So it's important to register as something recognizable among other participants. So I have already my account, so I'm just gonna click on this.
We make our own password.
I'm sorry?
We make up our own password.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, probably just for today is one time, so. Once you log in, there are two options, administer versus participate. For you, I can click on the participate, and then I'm gonna administer. If you create the session, then you should click on administer. But if you participate the session, especially for the students, you will click on the participate. And then first things you will see if you click on the participate, it's the same for here, getting started, which is the guide of how to play on your screen. And then in my screen, just tells me how to create the sessions. And then there's a YouTube guide. So if you want to use this tool, just watch and then follow through it. And then also I'm gonna play myself. If I want to do that, just sign in as in incognito mode, and then just go through. Yeah, so the first thing, so you see the session key, which right now it's not available because I'm gonna generate one soon. But this is kind of the key for this activity. Those who share the session key go to the same session, so that the other players are together in the same session key. For example, if you have a large enough class and then you want to divide it into the groups into 2 or 3, it's possible to do that. You just need to generate the different session keys and then give the students in a different session keys. Those who share the session keys into the same session, and those who are in a different session keys go to the different sessions. Any questions so far? And now I'm going to create your session. So I just give it name Sunbelt workshop. And then there is information about each of them. So if you want to learn about, for example, there is a 2 version of 6DOS actually exists. One is called the person version of it. This is very close to the what the 6 degrees of separation experiment. And then the other one is called attributes. If you are interested in concept of, like, for example, transactive memory systems like TMS, you can do that because the attributed version is basically the you ask questions of skills, and then the players trying to find those players match the skills. So that's pretty much you can test the who knows what and a method, knowledge of skill set and expertise. But that's a different way of using these tools. And then another thing that you can add is the questionnaires. I'm just going to use the pre-existing one, just add, or you can generate whatever questions you want, and then done. And then so 6DOS actually can use for the research. That was my dissertation. But of course, you don't want to collect data from students, then you just say no. Then we don't collect any data for research use. And then another cool feature about this tool is actually it can generate the bots. If you want to test yourself, you can, I think, 20 at most, so you can generate the bots, and the bots randomly behave. So you can add like artificial players into the game, or you don't want to play and then just want to see the result. You just play with the bots. And then other useful stuff exists, but that's additional stuff. So I'm just going to skip to it and then just say launch. Once launched, what you see is there is a session key. So that's basically tells your students. So in this case, for hours, so it's a 649 and a punch into the number, and then it's enrolled, and then the next thing asks is your educational background, and then you can say submit. Once you submit, so my animal was what? So each player is now become one of the animals. And then from the background, you can see the number of players already enrolled. So just I'm gonna wait a couple of minutes. Brennan, oh yeah, Brennan is here. Anyone else is going to join? No? No. It's good. Yeah. Then I'm gonna click on next. And then next thing is you need to decide is a number of contacts that each player can choose. So the default option is 2, and it's at least 2 and at most 2, means that everybody needs to choose 2 contacts. But you can vary the number. For example, change to the 1 and 2. So some people may choose 1 contact, and other people choose 2 contacts, or increase this 3 or whatever numbers. And today I'm just gonna do the 2-2. And also, if you are interested in like creating secondary contacts, for example, if you wanna differentiate strong contacts and weak contacts, like weak ties and then strong ties, you can do that too. But today I'm gonna proceed like this. And then what happened is that if you are going to your screen, now change to the phase where you need to choose your contacts. So today, I'm gonna ask you pick 1 organizers and then 1 of your attendees as your contact. So I'm gonna choose Brennan, and then, yeah, I'm gonna choose here. And then once you select the contacts, hit next. Then you're gonna wait for the other players to finish networking. And again, while as an admin, I could monitor who is finished networking or not. Great. We are waiting for 2 people.
Yeah, I should put social science into the options.
Yeah.
Attributes, right? Disciplines.
Yeah.
There's no social science.
Oh, sorry. You can add that.
Oh, we can add that.
Yeah, manually. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And then once everybody chose, we decide how long the session should be. Default is 3 minutes. And today I'm just gonna do the 2 minutes quick round. And then the second thing is, so each time this system generates a message, and a message have a destinations. And then the next one is asking how many new messages is generated for every player. And the default is 1 minute, but I'm just come down to the 30 seconds because it's a short sessions, and then I want you to engage more. And then there are other options. For example, you can do the com delays and so on. And then the final things that we need to select is the degrees of separation. Unfortunately, it's such a small network, so I think some people have a direct contacts and so on. And if you have a much larger audience, then the degree of separation is becoming larger. And like you see usually 4, 3, 4, 5, but the 10 people choosing 2 contacts, this often happens. And then there is an explanation of that. All right, now are you guys ready to play it? Yes, then we're gonna do that. All right, now if you go to your screen, it's changed to the sort of tutorials and it tells you what the things you should look for it. And then just click through next and next. Yeah, the basic idea is you just pick one contact and then send the message. And if you click on send messages or destination, you tells you how your message went. And then if you're the target of destination, whether you receive these messages or not. Let's keep coming. Yes. All right, 20 seconds. Ten seconds. It's a very quick run. All right, now it's finished the session. And you have 2 options, the view results, or you can ask students if they want to run another round. Then if you click on the yes, and if you look at the admin side, you can see the poll, how many participants who ask for rerun. And if you want to do the rerun, just click on this bottom button of rerun. That's basically automatically send the players, those who participated in the previous session, go to another session directly without typing into the session key. Today, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go to the view results. And if you click on the view result, the first thing that you see is the kind of key highlight of the session. There are 10 players, and then each chose 2 contacts, and then 40 message was initiated, and then 20 messages completed, which is completion rate of 50%. And then if you click on the next tab called a contact network, this was a network visualization of what this choose network looked like. So I'm the hub connecting the almost the 2 components of the network. And then you can highlight the person and then moving around. Right. And then also here, you can change the circular or cluster layout. And also if you click on the download network, you can actually download the network of this as a CSV file. So you can do some network analysis on your own. And if you click on the relay network, and the difference between the relay network and choose network is that now there is a thick line and the thin lines, meaning that the thick lines are more used, and then thin line is less used in the session. And if you also download that data of how many ties are used and so on, download the network with the same CSV file. And then the next tab is what we call a message path, where you can see what the sample path looks like. So in this case, it's the shortest distance is 2. It's started from Sarah and then Dawn, and then goes to the Michael. But what happened in reality is that the Sarah sent it to me, and then I sent it to Brennan. And then Brennan went back to Sarah, and Sarah sent back to me, and then Brennan, and then it's never-ending path of incomplete.
My bad.
My bad too. And then some of the great example is this completed one. So there is incomplete and completed, right? So completed one, this is supposed to be a 2 pass. And then what happened is, yeah, so Verena can send it to me, and then me send it to Payne. But what happened is Verena sent to Shelby, and then Shelby sent it to me, and then me sent it to Payne. So this is a great way to highlight, how students or players imagine the network looks like, and they use the network to share information. And then finally, the last tab is called participant matrix, and where we have the network awareness as one of the indicator. So Michael, congratulations, you relayed 5 messages, and out of 5, you use the shortest path towards the destination. So your network awareness score is 100%. And also Dawn, you have much more messages, but every message is you chose the contacts who are on the shortest path towards the destination. So that's why it's 100%. And then also you can click on the names, and then you can see some of the network metrics. So you can use for the teaching as well. So this is a very quick way of demoing 6DOS, and I'm just gonna end with some quick frequently asked questions. Who use the 6DOS? What is the session key, and how do I obtain it? As I demonstrated, session key is generated if you administer the session. And then basically this can connect the players together in the same sessions. And also, which browser should I use? I think just avoid Internet Explorer if the students are going to use. We tested other browsers that tend to be good, so it's okay. Is the platform mobile compatible? Yes, but we recommend participants play it computers or tablets. Would be better experience, but I have seen the students just use the mobile phone to play it. How many contacts are a good number for sessions? So as I said, again, it's a 2 contacts, and rule of thumb is thinking about network density. So if you have like the 20 players, I would set it as network contacts of 3, because that's basically gives you a network density of 16%, which is more or less simulate the friendship network in a classroom, because the network density of 20, something around that line. And how do I tell players to choose your contacts? Here, you can exercise your creativity. It depends on your purpose. A suggestion is choose like 1 strong and 1 weak contacts, or another is completely random. And actually, that's the David Cracker does. The first, he told the students, oh, pick like your students or close contacts. And then next round, he said, completely random. And what happened is the second round, the completion rates dropped significantly because people could not imagine, who picks whom. So their network awareness suddenly depletes by choosing a random contacts. Or if you want to illustrate information overloads, you pick the 1 person in the middle of the class and then ask everybody to choose that contact, and what happens? because that person bombarded by the messages, and you can demonstrate how the effective information overload look like. So here is a resource links. If you have access to the slides, you can just click on it and then look through it. And that's pretty much it from me. And then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Right.
You ever give them Stanley Milgram's article?
Yes, sometimes, especially the psychology today one. It's a very short one and it's very nice. So yes.
And that was way it's the one who followed the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it possible to download the participant metrics?
No. So that part is, and also participant metrics is some metrics are not accurate. Yeah. So I think that if you really want to use it, I think that you just download the networks and then calculate it on your way, like UCINet or like any other packages.
This is free to use, like
Yeah.
we can access any time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And we can, so for example, we have social network analysis courses that we teach. So if we have like 25 participants, we can share the link and we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in the same way. You just administer as admin and then just create a session key and then give it to the students.
We even played it in like 100 people class.
Yeah.
It still works.
Yeah.
And people love it.
Cool thing to like help them visualize how networks are structured, how it starts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And usually I will play like 2 rounds because first round people still like getting familiar with the platform itself. And like second round people actually know like how to activate their network and who to choose their contacts. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, as I said again, it's a good ice-breaking activities, and then kind of get into the network concept. Yes. Right. Oh, thank you very much. All right. Next tool is My Dream Teams and MDT. Brandon, are you going to present?
Yeah, I can present.
All right.
If that works.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me okay? Is the audio working well? Just double checking.
Did I switch the screen share to you?
Yeah, that would be best. Let me share my screen if you can.
Yes, stop sharing. Yeah.
Okay, great. Did that work?
Yep. Be seeing your screen. Yep.
Okay, great. So the next exercise we're gonna present is an activity that you can use for teaching about team assembly and helping people build teams, but also reflect on the process of how do we decide who's on a team, what skills or areas of expertise or perspectives are valuable, and how do we put together a team? So that's sort of what we came up with for this My Dream Team platform. So overall, team assembly is kind of a big space in the literature. So there's a difference between like formally staffed teams. So teams where it may be assembled by an external person, it may be assembled by one leader, or it may be dictated by organizational structure. That's one end of the spectrum. The opposite end of the spectrum is sort of these self-assembled teams. It's teams where you're reaching out to someone and you're kind of putting together a team, usually in response to some sort of goal or need or a shared sense of purpose. So my dream team is focusing on this question of self-assembly and how can we help people build these teams and engage people in this process. So we're looking at self-assembled teams where users have choice. So they're able to build their own teams and it's not dictated by an algorithm. It's not dictated by external staffing. So looking at that, we're looking at informed team formation. So that's where we want to introduce this platform called My Dream Team. I'm not going to play the video, but I will like very quickly say that we have these great video resources that Nashir helped produce that sort of describes the platforms and the different processes. So I'm going to briefly show you kind of what the platform looks like. There's links in the slides as well as the handout, but it's a platform like this, and it helps you build teams. So you sign in. It's kind of like almost kind of like a dating app where you sign up, you make a profile. So this is kind of showing the process of filling out information about yourself, your teaming skills, your personality, these different areas. And you build this profile. And then what happens is you specify what you're looking for in a team. And then you're able to begin this process of self-assembly. So you're able to see people's profiles, how they're connected with others, look at different aspects of them, and then you can invite someone to join the team within a platform. So you send them a message, they can message you back, and you formalize this team building process. And that's the big picture of sort of what My Dream Team is. So how do you sort of use My Dream Team as a teaching exercise or sort of set it up to run in a class? We have a full video on the administrative details that's in the slide, so I will just very briefly, in the interest of time, kind of gloss over them for this presentation. But there are more resources out there that will fully guide you through the process. So the big picture question with My Dream Team is, what factors were you more or less likely to consider because you used the technology to form teams? So kind of one of the learning objectives is to get people to think about what's important when I build a team, and how do I go about the process of self-assembling a team. And those are big picture takeaways about like team assembly, about how do I leverage my networks and build a collaboration that, yes, apply when you're using this technology tool, but it's also a general learning takeaway that people can have, thinking about deliberately building teams. And that's something they can a takeaway students can have even when they're not using this exact platform for team building. So kind of the research about this has examined with a platform how using an online platform sort of impacts team forming decisions. So you can, by providing people with information or making algorithmic suggestions, you can kind of influence how people build teams. So in the platform, there's a lot of information on the participants, their scores, what's going on with there. And ultimately, what we found in testing is that using this type of platform has some impact on sort of who you're more or less likely to invite. So there is an ability of the algorithm to kind of nudge you in different ways. I'm using the kind of concept of nudging broadly, but by presenting you with different information, you may make different decisions about how to form a team. So I'm going to skip over some of the details of the research, but we have been using this platform partially for research purposes to kind of study what's going on. And we've been able to show that in terms of diversity, in terms of team performance, using a tool like this influences team formation and also team outcomes. That's one of the kind of the big takeaways from the platform, is that how you build a team is going to impact how successful the team is. We're really interested in not just forming teams, but the consequences of team formation for team performance. So big picture, this platform can influence performance. Let me talk a little bit more about like this platform as a teaching exercise though. So when we're running this, there's kind of two different purposes you can use My Dream Team for. The first purpose is if you're running a long-term class, and that's a project-based class, so you have students working on some type of group assignment, maybe like a final project at the end of the quarter. My Dream Team is a platform that you can use to help students build teams. What are the benefits of doing this? It can help people connect with peers they don't know. It can help kind of break people outside of existing groups. For example, if you have a class that's taught across departments or across universities, it can help students connect with people from other departments, other universities, and build sort of interdisciplinary teams where they can learn from one another. The platform and the process of using it also gets students in this mindset of, I'm going to set up a profile. What are my contributions to the team? So like, how am I kind of marketing myself or presenting myself on the app? And then what kind of characteristics, what kinds of traits do I want to bring into the team by inviting team members? Do we want different perspectives? Do I want to seek out someone with a certain skill? Those are the types of questions people ask when they're using the platform. So that's kind of the first use case is we might use it for like a semester or a quarter-long project. The second use case is you can use it as sort of a one-off teaching exercise. So if you're using it as a one-off teaching exercise, what you can do is you can say sort of imagine a hypothetical scenario. So imagine you were on a desert island and you needed to survive for 30 days. How would you want to build a team for that? And with that fictitious scenario, we can kind of ask students, hey, just imagine the scenario. You don't actually have to live on a desert island. If you do that, who would you want to put on the team? And use this platform to try to assemble those teams. And then they do that process, they build the teams, and then we can do a debrief exercise and we can start to ask students, how do you connect with each other? What skills do you want to leverage? So those are kind of the two use cases where this kind of platform can come in. Were there any questions in the room?
Question.
Yeah.
I'm curious about potentially adverse effects. So have you had the experience that for some teams, certain students, certain people might remain isolated, not be chosen for teams for whatever reason? And what kinds of effects did that have on the individual concern and on the team structure?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good question. With any type of team formation, whether it's using this platform or not, that's definitely a question that we have to think about as educators and like, what are the effects of how does team formation play out? And are there some people who are going to struggle to find a team, people who can feel isolated? Definitely that's like a concern that I don't know that this platform is exactly an answer for that, but it at least gives people an easier avenue to like reach out to others or see who maybe see people who are still looking for a team. But that may not be a like full solution to the problem, and that's like a very good question to think about in terms of pairing people up.
Yeah, as a user, I mean, in the past, I think it's really tough because some students are more active and other students are not active. And it's a platforms facilitate a way to create the teams, especially like the group projects. And those who are active are more likely to create the ideal teams. And then those who are not active, basically, we need to finally assign them to somewhere. So it's like our intervention to coordinate with them to negotiate if this team is okay for you. So I think there are some certain balance between their autonomy of creating teams as self-assembly processes versus as an instructor, you might need to intervene to make more inclusive and then feel like comfortable for everybody.
Just a follow-up
question.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, is there a setting, for example, that enforces the system that every single person needs to be part of a team? I'm thinking of the long-term student projects that we're talking about, for example. Or is that not?
That's a good question. Brennan, do you?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, the audio picking up on my end is a little garbled.
So basically, she's asking, is there a setting that we force every participant to be in a team, so we don't have like leftover like in the classroom?
No, I don't think there's a setting for that. Generally, part of how we've used it in teaching is that sometimes like instructor kind of intervention is necessary, where we're able to like monitor sort of what are the teams that have been like finalized in the platform and see just on the admin page, like at a glance, like who is in a team, who's currently not in a team. And that's let us like kind of manually deal with the process of like reaching out to students to either suggest they find a team or suggest a potential teammate. So if we're doing like a project with like groups of 3 to 4 and everyone's found the team, but there's like maybe 3 kind of students who are left, it gives us the ability to see who's not in a team and like quickly reach out to maybe some of those people with like potential teammates or someone they should talk to.
Yes.
As for social scientists, it seems like one use case could be illustrating homophily.
Yes.
So we could see all the attributes that are kind of people are selecting.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so I think one of the past research from using these tools illustrate like prior collaboration that has very strong effect. So if the students prior to doing a group project, if they have a past project together, that's predicted and they're more likely to form a team again.
And there's another research on diversity. So in this tool, there is a cool feature that can calculate the diversity score, like in terms of like different aspects of gender diversity, expertise diversity, and people can see those like diversity scores when they choose their team members. And when we did some experiment like in our lab, we found displaying those diversity scores actually would not affect people's choices of their team members. So that is not a really good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're visualizing the network, can you size the node or color the different edges depending on the communication that they're having?
For this, we don't.
No, we don't visualize that.
For this specific one, we don't visualize it. Yeah.
Do you do it, like I usually give group workshops and random, but I always very careful about the leaders. Everybody participates. No one gets voted. But what's the issue with the outcome? Do you actually measure the outcomes of the task performed?
Yeah, so in this particular study, it's a task performance or the group project performance.
So do groups pick with my dream team and groups not pick with my dream team and look at the performance?
That's a good question. I don't think the experiment differentiated my dream team use versus no.
You have learning objectives.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a good suggestion.
Can you rate, like after assignments completed, can you rate your team members? So if like you're in a group project and someone's not pulling their weight, can you rate it?
Yeah.
Rate that or
not in the platform, but like I think that we had like the Qualtrics survey for the rating purposes. Yeah. So I think that resource is also available upon request.
Yeah, we use it for this like long-term assignment class as well. Yeah, like the semester assignment. But we do find like for some of the teams, if we assign members like manually as educators, we assign members into that team, sometimes they will have trouble like compared to those like self-assembled. Yeah.
Yes.
Out of curiosity, is there a recommendation feature?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So basically, it's like if you are dating apps, like especially the old days, like the before Tinder, like Match.com, they have a list of like top 10 risks based on like a personality traits or your social capitals and what you look for teammates. We sorted out like okay, this is the top candidate you should pick as the teammate.
But I didn't mean from the system. I meant more along the lines of, say I need to pick a team of 5 members and I've already chosen 3. Can the 3 members recommend others who might be a good fit?
Yeah, so basically that each member can send out the request, and also there's a message features so that the other members can talk about.
But if we want a new member to join the team, the system set up that it requires the consent from all the existing team members. Yeah. So that is
All good questions. Right. Then we're gonna move next.
break or
I think the rod is the next one, and then we're gonna take a break.
hang there. We will introduce another activity before taking a break. I know it's a lot of
A lot of it. So next activity also connected to my dream teams because it's a group exercise.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so the third activity like we want to introduce here is called relational analytics dashboard, and so we call it RAD for short. And what is it? So it is an interactive in-class activity, so people can work in teams, and people can also like work remotely if they want individually, and then discuss the takeaway from it. So 3 goals to play this activity. So first, a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, nonprofit organizations, they're using internal communication platforms nowadays, like Microsoft Teams, Slack, and they are also collecting our data to inform their decision making, and they construct the communication network, this kind of relational network, and get some key insights from it for the decision making in terms of hiring, firing people, restructure the organization. So this activity is that we want to mimic that process. So we provide a dashboard that have those like hypothetical data of people's like communication network, and we want to see like how student team, like how teams like in the classroom, they will weigh different factors like in the write up or like in this dashboard for their decision making, like for team assembly. And the second goal here is, so we have the digital traces that we use to build this dashboard, and we also have some non-digital traces results. For example, like we give people's background of like their education background, like their gender, like this all kind of information. So we want to see like how they combine, like how they evaluate all those information in their like team discussion processes. And a third is like very important. So we also want to give students an opportunity to discuss like what is the social implication, what is the broader social organizational implications for those companies to use this kind of technology, to use this kind of platform for the organizational processes. Some of the ethical issues are also very important to be discussed. So, okay, let me move on. Okay, so we created like 2 YouTube videos. One is the introduction of the dashboard itself. So it is an 8-minute video. I'm not going to show you at this time, but I will just going to demonstrate it live. Oops.
Oh, that's okay.
So how can I exit? Yeah, and then we go to the dashboard.
There's a link.
You can also click the link on the teaching deck, so you can have the access to our RAD website as well. So this is the main website of RAD.
So along with the 2 YouTube videos, one is introduction to the dashboard itself, and the other is the case study. So we want to give people a hypothetical scenario so people know like the background of like which team they want to assemble, the purpose of the about the activity. So, oops, where is the login thing? It should be there. There should be a login button, right? It's still loading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe just a case study.
Okay.
Meanwhile.
So while the website is loading, I will briefly talk about the case study.
Just internet connection, I guess.
I can talk about like in the teaching deck. Okay.
I can share my screen real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can share your screen, that would be great, Brennan.
Yeah, just stop the.
Okay. Okay, so you can take a, so here is the website and you click log in and enter and you will see like the main interface of the dashboard. Brennan, can you look up by name, for example, Cameron? So all those data are fake data. So like those are not like actual employees like in the company. So we just made it up. Yeah, so you go to the first tab. Okay, yeah, so begin typing and select employee. So if you can do Cameron here. Okay, so like we can select some of names on this platform, and you can see the picture of Cameron, the job title, the department they belong to, and here personal network means their communication network. So it is constructed based on their data left on the enterprise social media platform like Slack. And if we go to the departmental network, we can see that his network in his specific department. So we can see here he's an isolate in his department. So he is not talking to anyone else in his department. And we can also see this formal structure of the department as well. So Cameron is kind of at the lower level, like in this case, right-hand side. And if we go to the likelihood of generating a good idea, so these scores are calculated based on people's network, and this specific score is calculated based on the burst constraint. So if you have a very high burst constraint, that means the likelihood of generating good idea is low. So like all the statistics is based on like the network measures. And then risk of resignation. So this is the turnover, like how likely like people will resignate from the organization. And this is also calculated based on people's communication network. So it's saying when people, they have the intention to turn over and they will kind of starting to disengage with their coworkers in the past like 2 months of this time frame. So this percentage is calculated based on their connectedness to their coworkers in the last 2 months period of time of their communication network. And lastly, if you go to the availability to generate buy-in, so this is a buy-in network. So yeah, so like you can you can get like all this information like calculated based on people's communication network from this platform, and you can also see the organizational structure. And Brennan, if you can go to the design high performance teams. So this is a very cool feature. So we can choose like all different people, like to put them in the employee pool, and then we can drag those people like to different teams. And we can have like different team options to see like hypothetically, if we put those people like in a single team, what would the internal cohesion and external range of those teams would be. So for example, Brandon put Cameron, Edna and James in a single team. So team option A, we can see that the internal cohesion of that team will be 0. So people don't get along with each other like in this specific team, but the external range of that team will be very high. So that means like people are connecting like with different unique individuals in the organization. Then based on the network theory, their likelihood for innovating like ideating will be high, because they have non-redundant information from all like other people. Okay, so people can try out different options like for those teams. Yeah, so those are the main like feature of this dashboard specifically. How do we want to implement them in a case study? So I can take the screen sharing, Brandon. Thank you. So far, any questions? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Yeah.
The case study I believe you mentioned was hypothetical. Was that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Have you already tested this with real world clients or companies?
No. So this is actually a good point, but yeah, so we are going to discuss like in later. There are some like ethical implications about it, like to test it in real world company. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is a case study, and the link of the case study is also on this main Brad website, and so you can click the case study PDF, so you can have the access to the write-up of the case study itself. And I will just go back to our slide stack to give you some context, like highlight some key points from the case study. Okay, so this case study, we made it up, and the company is called Saving Milgram Health. And Kioski, it was one of the main contributor of writing up this case study. And we call it Milgram because, Milgram study is kind of an internal network joke. And then House, because we wrote it. So Kioski wrote it, not me, but Kioski wrote it at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's a very timely and relevant issue here. So in this company, it's a house insurance company, and Sarah just succeeded the former CEO who was forced to resign in the midst of a financial scandal. And this company, Milgram Health, is one of the nation's largest provider of the house insurance and the services. And Sarah really want to wrap up the company's information technology to enable their health services. Background: pandemic hit the country, and Sarah argued that the CEO of the company argued that like social distance and remote work might favor a surge in demand for offering a growing number of startups that were natively designed as online platforms. So they want to have their built-in like native social networking online platforms. And so this is a task of this case study. So she proposed that she wants to assemble a Milgram healthcare for all, so MAHA, in short, task force, and there will be 4 people in this task force, and they will charge to spend no more than 6 months to develop new ideas and their like personnel, individual, family, digitally enabled healthcare plans. And this 4 people, they will work as a team to incorporate information, and this team should be highly innovative. Okay, so this is people's goal. So recommend the best 4 people task force from at least 4 departments at the company. So people have experience in managing portfolios of medication products, coordinates the campaign, study the proposed packages, and has insight on how to acquire and retain talents. So basically we want one person from at least like one department to ensure the diversity of the team. And the company, so the company has implemented this enterprise social media platform that tracks people's organizational network, and the data is available on our NetRed platform dashboard. So which allows for the exploration of survey data and give you some insights into the organization, the teams, and the personal network formation. Okay, so this is our candidate pool. So we have Cameron, Raymond, Maria in the production. Like we have like 3 people like from each department that student want to consider for this MAHA task force. And there are some factors people should take into account. A good idea, generate buy-in, risk of recognition, other factors like in the write-up that we didn't mention here. And the team factor, which is the internal cohesion and external range, which is like displayed in the dashboard. So there's a structural signature of risk recognition, like we've mentioned before. Internal cohesion, external range. So these 2 measures are calculated based on this Harvard Business Review article called Better People Analytics. So it's looking at the balance between the internal density and the external range of the team network. Okay, and the people. So we will put people like in teams, put students into different teams, and they will discuss the scenario and play with the RAD dashboard for around 15 minutes to 20 minutes, and we'll ask them to submit their responses, so their nomination for the 4-person team to this Google form. So as educators, we can get like people's like nominations and like how they think about the team, and they will also like enter like their rationale to choose this candidate pool. So we can use it as a reference. Access to the dashboard, the link, and submit your response to this specific Google form. And debrief, this is very important part, because after people submitted their responses to the Google form, like we want to give people some opportunity to reflect on why it is important and what are some main takeaways from this activity. So the first question we would ask people is, to what extent did the network data reinforce or change what you might have chosen based on the reading material? Second is, what criteria did you use to select your task force members, and how did you weigh this criteria when you selected the task force members? And other information that I did not mention here, like for example, we would encourage people to think about diversity. Like we didn't explicitly include the diversity information, but based on the pictures, like people's pictures on the platform, we can tell, oh, is it female or male, or like the race of the people. So we will ask people if they take those into consideration. Maybe the team have a very high internal cohesion and a very high external range, but the team is not very diverse in terms of those demographic information. So this would be something that we encourage people to think about. And the high risk of recognition, did this increase or decrease your likelihood of putting them into that task force? And other descriptive factors, so I already talked about the gender parity, and what are the ethics of organization using a tool like our like RAD for decision making. So going back to your question, so a lot of people were concerned the organization are collecting our data and it's not respecting like our privacy. So it's kind of an ongoing process now. The negotiation between the employees and the employer, how we can make everything transparent at the same time, protecting the privacy. So we will not use this data to make some. We will not like fully rely on this data to make decisions in the organization. And those are some of the like bar chart like we can create directly from the Google form, because it's Google form. So they will create those bar chart and pie chart like for us like very fast, so that we can show people like immediately how other classmates in the class like choose, and what is the statistics of the teams they assemble. And those are some example of like students' responses to the Google form. And this is another like example team like we will show people, because something like we realized when we ran the activity in the class, people really relies on this dashboard and things can become like really competitive. So people really want to chase a very high score of internal cohesion and external range like on that platform, and they kind of test out all different like combinations of like possibilities of those team members and to see if we can get a good score. And so usually we'll show people this kind of case. So we have a very good score like on internal cohesion and external range. But if we take a look at the individual level factors, the buy-in for all those 4 people are kind of low. So this is also an educational opportunity like for people to think about like to what extent we should take into account the information from the dashboard itself and how to weigh those criteria. Yeah, so to summarize, the teaching point of it is people analytics, network centrality, organizational learning, and the target audience can be like all levels. It can be undergrad, grad student, and also like MBA student, executive audience. We have 2 YouTube videos and people can watch. One is introduction to the dashboard and one is introduction to the case study. So usually we'll just ask people to watch those YouTube videos before class so people get prepared for that. And then actual exercise activity, 30 minutes, 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and we'll do a debrief for 15 minutes to 20 minutes. So that's all I have for Brad. Any questions? Yes.
So the network centralities, where was that? Or you couldn't just show everything today?
Network
teaching points you have network in your summary. Because like for example, it'd be very interesting who's the highest eigenvector, who's the highest, and the first combination.
So for this exercise, a lot of things we rely on is Monsieur and Paul Melody. They wrote the Harvard Business Review, and which kind of using these network centrality ideas into 6 what they call the network signatures. And these signatures are somehow aligned with like investor centrality or like network degrees and stuff, but like they don't use the technical terms. So they convert it into like influence signature or so that's kind of we try to accommodate certain audiences. So that's kind of what the dashboard is mainly showing.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned this, but I'm a little jet lagged before. Can we customize this case study?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just our purpose of creating case study.
Because I'm inside the dashboard. How do I actually customize it? Like, how do I change it?
Oh, the dashboard is very difficult to, it's not that possible like to customize the dashboard itself or the database. But you can customize the write-up of the case study. So the whole context, like the PDF file. Yeah. Yeah. But not this dashboard. Yeah. But you can make up like all the other like information, actual information, like all the characters like we put in the dashboard. Yeah. Yeah. And it's good because like people don't need to create an account like on this dashboard, and people will just like take a look at it. So there is no like other.
Only downside is it's sometimes very slow.
Yeah, that's
so
a downside.
They got 100 students. We divide it into the 20 teams. Only the 20 people are going to sign into the dashboard.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the team members kind of share to look at the screen together.
Any other questions? If not, we'll take a break finally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's 15 minutes, so we will reconvene 55.
And then we're going to wrap up with discussing what these exercises look like put together into a semester-long syllabus, as well as some concluding remarks. And then we'll do some more participant question and answer or discussion at the end. As a reminder, there's 2 separate slide decks for the workshop. So everything from this point onwards is going to be in the second of the 2 slide decks, and those are both linked in the handout. Yeah, so let's get started. So the last exercise that we had seen, the relational analytics dashboard, was about networking in organizations, but it was a sort of an abstract case study. So people were coming together to discuss a hypothetical scenario and coming together to kind of reflect on what is the information we can gather from networks? How can that inform our thinking about the scenario? With this next exercise, we wanted to move further into the applied spectrum and to help people not just to think about networks and organizations, but to think about their own networks and directly what their current real world networks look like and how they can sort of leverage or improve those networks more. So that's what motivated the development of this exercise called the Personal Network Report, or the abbreviation for that is PNR for short. So PNR is an exercise that guides sort of learners through self-reflection, as well as empirical quantitative-based feedback on real networks. So this is an exercise in which participants are asked to picture a network context, and they're going to reflect on that, visualize the network, and sort of think about how to improve that network. So when I say real world network, that can mean a lot of different things, and that's going to depend on the context of for whom you're running this exercise, as well as sort of the context individual students want to, or learners want to pick. So for instance, you might be running this exercise as part of a course with undergrads, in which case they may be able to picture like their job, an internship, or like their sort of networks within like the cohort of their major. Whereas for people in a professional program, or if you're running this at a company, people may be able to directly picture their sort of real world networks today of who do I work with on my team or in my department at a job, either a recent or a current job. And then how can I reflect on that or sort of leverage network thinking to have some key takeaways? So that's the goal of this exercise, is to guide learners through this sort of self-reflection process. So that's big picture PNR, or the personal network report. We're going to provide a report that has feedback on your personal network. And real quick, this is an exercise that was developed with Jasmine and Neelam and Nashir, who are also in attendance today. Great team. So let me show you a little bit about what this personal network report I'm talking about looks like. And then I'll go through kind of some of the teaching materials and how we present the exercise in class. And all of this is linked in the slide deck, by the way, so you're able to get to it from there. So let's look at the sample personal network report. So it would be customized with details on a network you describe. In this case, it's just going to say sample person. And the report kind of benchmarks properties of your network versus the average properties of other reference groups. So in this case, this sample person is talking about their academic cohort at school, and they're going to be compared against the network properties of other people in their academic cohort, against the network properties of other people in the same class as them, assuming this exercise was part of like some sort of teaching course that is being run. And they're going to be benchmark their network against people who have the same gender identity. So that's the report. There's some introduction text. And then the first thing this report does is it kind of breaks down what does your network look like, and it helps you kind of visualize it for some different relationships. So there's network visualization for advice, trust relationships, and then friendship relationships in your network. Then it's going to walk you through 6 different sections that talk about different properties of your network. Each of these properties is called a signature. So there's 6 signatures, and they talk about abilities that your network gives you the capacity to do. So it's not saying that necessarily you're good at these things, but you're structurally positioned in your network in a way that gives you some advantages or weaknesses. And what are the capabilities that are enabled or constrained by your network? So for instance, in this case, it's looking at ideation. These signatures are taken from an article on Better People Analytics that I'll discuss a little bit more detail later. But it's looking at the ideation score. So you can see that the sample person score was the 46th percentile, so about average. And it's looking at that score relevant to other people who talk about academic cohorts, where the ideation score tends to be on average a little higher, and relative to other people in the same course as them, where the average score on ideation tends to be a little lower. So that's sort of the plot, and you're getting feedback on for every signature, how's the signature defined, how do you score on it relevant to others. So noting, for instance, if you're in the top like 5% of people at the signature. And then we talk a little bit more about what having a high or low score means, and how you can start to think about different strategies or approaches for improving these scores. So it's just taking network properties like we would kind of think of, like Bert's constraint, and then putting them in a more accessible form and breaking it down so people can go through that sort of guided self-reflection process of thinking about their networks. So we go through 6 of those. We also have a similar reporting format for diversity score. So looking at properties like gender, race, or age diversity of your network. So am I being connected in my team to a relatively diverse group of people, or do I have a more homogeneous network? But using the same sort of reference groups to kind of report that. And then the final section of the personal network report is the social resources table. And it's a table that's kind of mapping out who are the people in your network and what different resources do you rely on them for. These resources being things like trust, someone you go to for advice, friendship, energy, so who's an energizer, and also who provides you with a sense of purpose. And by plotting out your relationships with all these people, you can start to look at time multiplexity, as well as which resources are more or less available. So in this case, the sample person has a lot of people that they go to for advice. but there's only one person in their network that they said was sort of an energizer, and only one person in the network who they said provided a sense of purpose. So then the other thing in this table is a personal reliance score. And that's how reliant are you on that one person for providing resources that other people don't other people don't provide. So in this case, they have a very high reliance score on Jen, because Jen's the only person in the network that they sort of described as an energizer, someone who like gives them enthusiasm or energy when they interact. So like their sense of energy is really reliant on Jen. And also that's important to think about, because if Jen sort of leaves the network, or if they lose their connection with Jen, then they don't have another person who's providing that sense of energy. So that's sort of plotting out like how sensitive you are to sort of turnover on that one person, and also to help you reflect on, hey, am I relying on this one person for too many things? And should I maybe sort of spread out that reliance amongst different people on my network? So those are kind of the overall sections of the report. That was just like to upfront show you what it looks like. And now I can kind of talk you through the teaching materials and how we normally sort of present and run this exercise with participants. So the personal network report, the goal is to help people develop their networks for success. And we run this as an exercise. So we describe it that it's kind of like a personality quiz, but rather than focusing on attributes of the individual, what's my personality, it's focusing on attributes of the network. Where am I situated in my context and organization? What are my relationships like and the relationships like around me? And what do those enable or constrain? So it's sort of this network version of a personality quiz. This exercise builds on and was inspired by this Harvard Business School article, Harvard Business Review article that Paul Leonardi authored with Nashir. And essentially part of the article was how do we think about networks in organizations and trying to make those kinds of like network thinking, network insights more accessible to people. And that's where they kind of coined this concept of structural signatures. So like properties of networks that kind of say what the network enables or what the network constrains. So these are kind of 6 of the signatures that we present in the report. Was there a question?
No.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so these 6 signatures capture kind of different network properties. So in lecture, we would discuss these more, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna move through it quickly. But we present these 6 signatures, and they're the same 6 that we go through in the report. So the way the exercise works is people provide in sort of a questionnaire form. They describe their network, and then they get back personalized feedback in these documents, answering the question, how should I build new connections, and how can I better leverage existing connections? Those are the things we want to guide them through this process of reflecting on. So the process kind of plays out in sort of 5 steps. So we ask people to pick a context. So that's their academic cohort, that's their past internship, that's their current job. They identify key people in that context. They describe their own network connections. And then they describe like sort of their contacts, network connections. So they're providing their perception of who they're connected to, as well as who their connections are connected to. And then lastly, they add some more details about different members of their network. So adding information like demographics that we use to calculate diversity scores. So interestingly enough, when we were running this in courses and with different participants, one of the things that kind of surprised us is that the process of going through kind of this questionnaire and just mapping out your network is something participants found to be like really useful or insightful, even before they received the report. And kind of the insight behind that is that everyone, when they think about like organizations or a job, they kind of have the heuristic or like the basic knowledge, like, oh, networking is important. It's good to network and build connections. But a lot of times people actually don't like take time in their day-to-day or like explicitly like block out a time in their schedule where they say, I'm going to reflect on my team, who's connected to who, what we can do differently, and how I can like better sort of go about networking and build my network. People don't always do that, and they don't always spend enough time doing that and like explicitly taking time to like map out their network. So participants sometimes have a lot of like insights or ideas just from like filling out the questionnaire and describing their network before we even get to sending them the report. Just taking time to do that and helping them like go through the process once is like really helpful to participants. So that was kind of the first like takeaway we had from teaching this with students and teaching this with organizations. So they've sat down, they've kind of filled out the questionnaire. What comes next? And what we do is we're going to send them we're going to provide them with two different guides. So the first is the personal network report. So that's what I kind of demoed the sample of. So it's a customized guide to their network. And basically it's comparing their network to the kind of average scores of different groups from all the people who have completed the questionnaire in the past. And that's something that we have automated. So they're able to get that report within 5 to 10 minutes, and it's just sent over email right away. So like their data isn't shared with the instructor. It isn't, there's no delay while other responses are gathered from their classmates. They're able to fill out the questionnaire and get some feedback like right away that they can look through the report, reflect on their network, and hopefully build off of that. Of course, there's kind of a question when you're running this in a class, or if you're running this with an organization and you're doing like a company like workshop, let's say, is a big question is how do I compare to my peers in the class or my peers in the organization if we're running it with multiple people in the organization? And that's where the second report comes in, the 360-degree network report. In that case, it's going to be very similar to the first network report, but it's going to add in the results on how their score compares to the average scores of their peers. So essentially, if it's a class of 30, it's how does my network score compared to the average score of all 30 people in the class. So again, we're just sharing averages. So it's kind of protecting individuals' privacy, and that you won't know who in your class is scoring high or low on something. You're just going to know like, oh, this is the average score, and this is how my score compares. So the reason that's split into a second report is that for that, you have to wait until everyone has filled out the questionnaire. So sometimes that can take a while. And so we send the personal network report you get right away that's just based off of past responses. And then the comparative 360-degree network report, you can generate that right before the debrief session and share with all the students. So the process of running this is actually pretty simple. So we have it all in one quick admin form. So this is kind of the instructions you need. There's links to the introduction slides that you show before assigning the questionnaire. And there's a link to the debrief slides that you show afterwards. I'll go through those next. But essentially, then you just send out a link to the P&R questionnaire. Participants can go through this, they can fill it out. If it's part of a session, if it's part of a class or an org session, you come up with a session code to give them. But otherwise, they just fill it out and they'll get the report emailed right away. You don't really have to do anything else. You can just like share the link. That generates the first personal network report. And then for the 360-degree report, if you want to generate those, you just go to this admin forum and you can say send comparative reports. You type in the session code that you used. You put the group name, and then you just click submit, and it will generate the 360-degree reports, and it will send them to everyone. So the process of running it is pretty automated, and it's very simple. The biggest burden on the instructor is just figuring out how do I want to present the slides, and just managing or checking in on people when are all the responses complete so I can send out that 360-degree report. So that's the basic process. So essentially at this point in like the introduction, I would show the slide. I would give students the link to fill out the questionnaire. And I would say enter session code teach, or I could replace teach with any other like short code. That's just an identifier. So that we on the server side, it knows who's in the same class, so it can generate those 360-degree comparative network reports. So I will run a live demo here, but if you're interested in it, you can go to this link. If you click it, it will take you to the questionnaire. You can fill it out, and then you should automatically get your own personal network report in 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, so that's the introduction slide deck. And the second slide deck you would present would be the debrief slide deck. So there's different ways you can run this as an exercise. So if you're teaching like a multiple week class, you could do that introduction at the end of a lecture, give students until like the next week's class to like fill out the personal network report questionnaire and look over the reports on their own time, and then do the debrief at the next lecture. It also works, and we've done this before, if you want to do it as like a one-off workshop or just in one class. What you can do is you can introduce the exercise, give students the link, so leave it at this slide, and then just give them like 15 minutes live in class. And they can like fill it out, they can get the reports, read it in class, and then you can do a class-wide debrief. So it works either as a spread out activity over time, or you can run it in a single session. We've also run it in hybrid or online courses, where the introduction and the debrief were like sort of a pre-taped recording, and then students sort of completed it on their own and did kind of a discussion assignment about their networks. So it's pretty flexible in the format, and it can really adapt to the needs of your course. So what does the debrief look like? So essentially in the debrief slides here, and they're also linked, it's going through kind of a recap of, it's like a personality test, except for looking at your social connections. So here's a sample network diagram for like fake data, just showing how to visualize a network. If you're teaching this as part of a network class, they may already know how to visualize the network. But if you're teaching this to maybe a one-off workshop or a wider audience, this is where you would kind of explain what a network visualization is, what it's showing. You would go through the different structural signatures, and kind of the key takeaway you want participants to have is to think about the weaknesses of your network, but also think about capitalizing on your strengths. With a report like this, it's easy, or some students may gravitate towards just focusing on like what their weaknesses are, but strengths are equally important. So you're thinking about like, what am I good at, and how can I sort of capitalize on those abilities? So if I'm positioned to like connect different groups as kind of like a broker, I should think about how I can capitalize on that or help information sharing in my network context. So then you can kind of go through the signatures. This is demonstrating on how to interpret the results. So I would talk about, here's your score, here's the different reference groups, and thinking about what it means or how you improve upon it. Then we can talk a little bit about diversity. And there are benefits to having diverse teams or diverse perspectives. And of course, the caveat you have to put in is that this is kind of based only on some aspects of diversity, and other things like diversity and like technical expertise or background areas of education is information that the personal network report won't have. So a lot of it is like very context dependent on it's very also dependent on the quality of the information that participants provide. And then going through the social resources table, that part I also demoed earlier, but looking at these 5 key social resources, which resources are more or less available in your network, and how much you're really reliant or over-dependent on individual people in your network. In this case, as a recap, all the rows are different individuals. So right now it's just fake data where it's showing like sort of initials. So after we kind of go through the reports, You can run some like large group discussion, but we also have like sort of a breakout activity. So we have people work with a couple people nearby them, or if it's an online course, you might put them into breakout rooms in Zoom and give people a chance to like individually talk through with each other, like what do they want to change or leverage about their network, and kind of get feedback or like hear how others are thinking about what they heard in their reports. So you can do this breakout activity real quick, give people a chance to discuss, and then bring it back to the large group. This final slide has sort of the idea of like goal setting. So thinking about either in the long term or in the short term, if I have a specific goal, how do I translate that into action items? So kind of walking people through the process of, if I want to accomplish certain things, how can I translate that into like specific actions I want to take in my social network to help me build connections or to leverage my existing connections better? And that's sort of the format or kind of the takeaway we want people to have from the exercise is they've taken the time to think about their networks, map it out, see what it is, and hopefully formulate some of their own action items on this. And the breakout activity is part of that. So the two key links I'll have here is the sample report and the admin form. The admin form also has like all the information you need to run the exercise, including links to a set of introduction slide decks and a set of debrief slide decks. So that should be kind of all the steps you need in order to run the exercise. Yeah, thanks. Did anyone have any questions on this?
I have a question. In order for our students to use this in a class exercise, do they need to consent into the study?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do need them to consent for data collection. Part of the way the personal network report works is that once someone kind of fills it out, a component of the report is kind of the reference distribution scores, where you get to see how your score compares to the average score of, if I'm talking about an academic cohort, the average scores of everyone else who has described an academic cohort. And while we don't share like individual level data, anyone that kind of fills it out, that score gets put into that average. So part of the consent form process is kind of explaining to participants how your data is used, and that nothing individual is shared, but your data is going to play a factor in those like kind of aggregate scores or those reference groups. And especially because we're like collecting very sensitive data, I think it's important that we have like a consent process. Yeah, so that's part of the thinking of why the personal network report is a little more strict on requiring like that we get participants' consent, and that we're very secure in managing the data. Most of it is, so all the data is just hosted locally in the Qualtrics server at Cornell that we have. So it's sort of directly connected into Qualtrics, and we just, that data gets used on a server for like generating the reports, and that's it. But that's a very big concern. Because unlike the other exercises we're presenting today, this is the network where this is the exercise where the information we gather is kind of the most sensitive because it's about real networks. So it's a very big concern, and we want to make sure that we're going through the proper consent process with everyone. Yeah, that's a great question, though. It's so important. Part of that is also, we don't actually give the administrators of the personal network report, like if you're using the admin form, we don't give you access to your students like individual data in this exercise, unlike something like 6DOS where you can kind of see what went on in the activity. The only information you can get like as an admin that's kind of additional is you get the count of how many people in your class have like filled out the survey. So I could see that like, oh, 24 people filled out using the session code I provided, but I don't get to see those 24 people's responses. So it's keeping the information kind of secure. So even as an admin, you don't really know like what they put in their networks. Yeah, that was a great question though. It's so important to think about these types of things. Were there any more questions?
I don't think so. Oh, no.
Okay, cool. Then let's move on to kind of the fifth and the final exercise. So this exercise is called the Argom Network Builder exercise. So unlike the previous four exercises that are kind of like very broad purpose or more like general networks oriented, this is definitely kind of the narrowest or the most like niche of these exercises. So this was designed in kind of response to a particular pain point. And that is when we were teaching sort of classes that cover network methodology, the hardest point in kind of the semester that we would run into is when we would try to teach the statistical technique that's called exponential random graph models. And that's the statistical technique for modeling networks and sort of this process of how do networks form and what are kind of structural patterns in network. So the hardest thing we would run into is helping students like understand what Argom is doing. How is Argom different from just running, say, a logistic regression, and helping people build that kind of intuition about it. It's where the course kind of goes from like being more like surface level or like more easy to grasp concepts like network centrality into more statistical modeling. And that was a really hard transition point we noticed for a lot of our students. And that's what sort of motivated the development of this teaching exercise I'm going to describe. So the goal of this exercise is to help students sort of experiment with network simulation, build an intuition about like what the different terms and effects in exponential random graph models represent, and understand how estimation of different terms is sort of interdependent on the other terms being estimated. Yeah, so again, this might be like the narrowest of the exercises we're going to present today, and that a lot of network courses aren't necessarily going to cover Argoms or go into that detail. But we wanted to briefly describe this exercise for those who are interested in teaching about the topic of Argoms. Yeah, so this is work also with Jasmine, Meng Xiao, and then Nashir. So we built this exercise where participants are going to use a web-based tool to be able to simulate networks according to exponential random graph models. And by simulating and doing this kind of interactive in-class teaching exercise, we hope we can help them develop intuitions about how exponential random graph models work in general. So this exercise is designed to be used sort of embedded within a course where you're already covering the topic of Argoms. And after you've introduced the topic of Argoms with slides and or readings, giving students a chance to like kind of experiment with it, play around, and develop more intuition about the technical methodological topic you've just covered. So that's kind of the context of where you would use this. So big picture, when you're teaching about Argoms, the kind of idea is you have an observed network and you're doing statistical inference. So you're going from that observed network, you're estimating a model, and that model is going to have a set of parameters that we can kind of represent as a vector theta. So you're kind of, normally the way you think about it is I take a network, I estimate the coefficients in a model, and those coefficients can correspond to different terms like the number of edges in the network, different star structures in the network, reciprocity, popularity, transitivity, different types of network patterns that represent interdependencies and how one sort of social connection in a network may be related to other social connections in a network. So how do we help learners sort of develop intuitions about what these terms represent or how to put them together into a model? So that's where we came up with the idea of looking at using the thetas, so the coefficients in the model, and using them to simulate new networks. So that's something that's already done in kind of the Monte Carlo maximum likelihood estimation process for ERGM. But we wanted to use sort of this process of like generating networks as a way to help students build intuition about like, what are the different terms in the model doing? So if I like change one of the coefficients and I kind of like dial it up, dial it down, how is that going to change the type of network that it corresponds to? How do those networks look differently? And that was kind of the goal of building this exercise. So we want to have them to have intuition about what the terms in an ERGM model are representing and about the interdependence between effects included in the model. So how if I like change one effect, then I may also need to change the other effects around that. How are the different effects kind of interacting to produce, based off of these local properties, this sort of complex structure in the network as a whole? So there's kind of two links I have here, or two parts to the exercise. So I'm going to show you the platform first, and then I'll show you the kind of worksheet and the exercises around the platform. So this is a web-based platform, meaning it's entirely in your browser. In this case, it was implemented via NetLogo Web. But it's kind of a simple interface for simulating networks. So I can click setup and it will generate a set of nodes in my network. So in this case, let's do 16 different nodes, and I'm going to set it up. And if I click go, it's going to move through Markov chain Monte Carlo steps, and it's just going to simulate a network. So there's nodes, and it's drawn these connections between all the different nodes in the network. And in these plots on the right, we can see it's sort of visualizing different properties of the network as we run the simulation. So in this case, we have the density of the network. We have the number of reciprocated ties, the number of homophilous arcs. So that's the number of ties between nodes that are the same. In this case, the homophily is based off of node coloring, so green nodes and red nodes, and how many ties are between nodes of the same color. And then we have triad statistics like the number of transitive and the number of cyclic triads. So where's the simulation kind of coming from? And it's coming from these sets of parameters. So these are like the ERGM terms you would put in. So like the edges coefficient. So if I make this value larger and I run it, it's going to increase the density of the network. So there's a lot more ties. So you can see that kind of jumped up. Whereas if I make the edges term negative, then we're going to get a sparser network as ties are less frequent. Let me turn that down a little bit just so that we can see network structure a little better. So we have the network properties, and we're able to like manipulate these properties. So in this case, if I make the edges very low and I make the homophily very high, then this network isn't clustered well, but we would see that there's a lot more ties from green nodes to green nodes and more ties from red nodes to red nodes relative to red to green ties. And basically, this just provides an interface for you to play around with patterns. So like patterns like 2 stars, manipulate kind of the coefficients in the ERGM model, and seeing how changing those coefficients has consequences for what the network looks like. So that then takes us to our sort of activity. So this is something we run as an in-class exercise. Let me just quickly zoom in on this a little more. Yeah, so we run this as an in-class exercise, and we have this handout that we can either print it or we can put it, just share a link. So it describes the exercise in a bit more detail. It provides a link to the platform, and it provides on the second page, we just have instructions. This is what the interface looks like. This is how it works to run the simulations and what it's doing. And then we have a couple activities. So we typically have students work in like small groups of like 2 to 3 people. We ask them to kind of sit around one computer and then like all kind of work on that computer together. So in each of the activities, we give them sort of a set of values to fix. So in this case, use a certain number of nodes, fix the edges coefficient at -3, and a set of parameters to experiment with. So looking at, say, the number of red nodes and manipulating that either to be higher or lower, and seeing if I change that, how does the network look differently? So if I change the composition of my network or nodes, I'm going to see a very different network look. I'm going to see a very different network, even if the ergom coefficients are exactly the same, because the node composition and the node kind of demographic attributes have changed. And similarly, we can ask them to manipulate the ergom coefficients. So for homophily, trying a positive homophily effect, trying a negative homophily effect, and seeing how the simulated networks look different by manipulating the parameters. And what this process does is it gets students to reflect on what are the different terms doing in the model, and guiding them through that. So we'll have students work on this exercise for, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then after they're done kind of working on it and discussing their small groups, then we'll kind of circle back up, have a large group discussion, and be able to like sort of call on students, ask them to summarize what they found, what they experimented with, what questions they had. And that provides a really good teaching moment. So the first exercise is homophily. Activity 2, we have them look at n-degree preferential attachment. So like sort of a degree popularity or a kind of a rich get richer effect, where if I have one incoming tie, it's more likely other nodes are also going to have a tie that goes to me as well. So we kind of ask them to experiment with different sets of parameters for that, and then reflecting on it. And then on the last page, we have a couple concluding takeaways, but that's something we can also just cover in sort of the large group discussion after the second exercise. Let me go back to the slides. So that's sort of the big picture of what the ergom builder exercise is. We built it to help just with students to build intuition about this one model of exponential random graph models. But by helping them build intuition about this, it's also kind of a good segue or like a starting point for other methods we tend to cover later in the course, such as autologistic actor attribute models or other models like Sienna that are doing more complicated simulations. Yeah, so that's a big picture of what the exercise looks like. Are there any questions on this exercise?
So for the desktop version of that logo, is it uploaded? Can I access it from the desktop version of the logo?
Yeah, so this is run actually in NetLogo Web, which is, so essentially the team behind NetLogo has built it. So NetLogo Web is able to run kind of model standalone. You can also like kind of program in NetLogo Web if you want to, but it has most of the functions and most of the features in the desktop NetLogo, though it may be slightly different. But kind of what that allows us to do for teaching is that the whole thing's kind of hosted on the web. So you can kind of run it. And if you actually click at the bottom, you can see like the full NetLogo code. In this case, that's maybe only really useful if you're teaching a class on like agent-based modeling that uses NetLogo. But the whole thing is sort of, it's not running on like an external server. We're not running it, but it's just kind of running in your browser. So NetLogo was just kind of a convenient way for us to build that, where it's just going to run off of your browser in kind of an HTML file that's built using NetLogo syntax. But also, if you wanted a desktop version, it's possible to like export it to just a NetLogo file that you can open with desktop NetLogo, or export it as an HTML file if you wanted to like upload it somewhere else, or like embed it into like a course site or like a course learning material.
Yeah, sure.
This is just really nice. Thank you for all the tools you guys gave today. It's just absolutely so helpful to your college. But I guess my question is, if one had access to this, could you use a different data set? And, you know, put that in to teach something the students would be working in? Like, for example, if you wanted to use 2 or 3 of these tools, it'd be nice to have I have a team that works all term on a digital history class, for example. And it'd be kind of nice to see, you know, infiltrate a couple of these tools to do it. And for sure, we'll use the worksheets I'm sure other people do the same. We developed and what we did, but might be very interesting, you know, because I use historical data sets. Might be interesting. I don't know if it's doable.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Kind of the way it works right now is that you're not we don't have it set up to put an empirical data set in, because sort of the all the ties and that type of thing is kind of generated from the model. So it's kind of the flip side of like what an ergom is, where normally with estimating an ergom, you take a known network and you get the parameters. And this exercise is letting students like manipulate the parameters and get a network. So if you wanted to like kind of build it around like a specific network where you have in class, or one thing you could do is you could just like kind of manipulate the number of nodes. And right now it only does one demographic attribute. That would be pretty, I think, easy to like add other demographic attributes for a distribution. And that's essentially kind of the part that's kind of the setup. And then all the ties and everything that happens after that is just going to come from the coefficients that you manipulate here. So one way that we haven't used it before, but that would be maybe an interesting use case, is if I have like a ergom that was fit and I like presented that in like my slides where it was fit off of a network of like 30 people. And I knew what all the coefficients were, I could like plug in those coefficients here, like taking like, oh, the edges term in the paper was 0.9. The reciprocity term in the paper was like 1 or like 2.1. If I plug those in here, and then if I run this for long enough, I should get like a network that resembles the original network from the empirical data. So you could kind of like take existing fit ergoms and kind of plug them in here. And that'd be an interesting potential use. Did that answer the question?
That's it. Thank you so much. I even understood it. That's good.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a weird way of like thinking about statistical modeling, in that it's kind of forcing learners to go and look at I have to actually manipulate the parameters myself and set this like by hand. And by doing it by hand, I have to understand like what the parameters are doing to like set up the network that's being simulated. So you're kind of having the students like manually do what normally the Markov chain Monte Carlo estimation process does automatically. And they're kind of having to manually puzzle out, oh, if I want the network to look a certain way where, oh, this one is way too dense and this isn't like my real network. So I have to go in and I have to turn the edges parameter down and then see if that like kind of produces what's the network pattern that I want. So they're kind of like manually going through that process of what the ergom does automatically. And hopefully that helps them kind of build intuition about what's going on under the hood.
Usually that we use for the interface model. So here that we use this for demonstrate the ERG. And what's the difference? What's the difference between the basic control and especially in the case that we design works? Then also that some of my team members that they used to use analog doing the ABN. And for us, that I think the most difficult part is that's the parameter setting. And so also that I think that using an error will require kind of programming technique. So for the students that who are not really familiar with the programming, would not be possible to use the set with more
Yeah, that's so first question is about the difference between ABM and ergom, and second question is about is there any like entry boundary like for using this specific tool? Yeah.
Yeah, especially does it require the programming skills?
Yeah, those are two very good questions. So like we built this tool in NetLogo just to kind of utilize the NetLogo web capabilities of like easily running in your browser. But this exercise doesn't necessarily have to do, or you don't have to really teach them anything about agent-based modeling. It's kind of just an implementation of like kind of the ergom algorithm. So what it does when I hit go is kind of just doing a Markov chain Monte Carlo process for updating the ties. And it's sort of the same thing that is kind of happening with Markov chain Monte Carlo if you're running ergom in like R or another environment. So it was just kind of a convenient place to program it was in NetLogo, but it's not really different than an algorithm you could write in any sort of coding language or coding environment. So we don't always, we sometimes run this before we've taught the students about agent-based modeling at all, or we're not covering that as a focus in the class. And that's generally fine with like, we just kind of introduce them to the interface with, I think, a little bit more of an elaborate explanation than I've given today. And also on the kind of handout, we cover that the first page is kind of describing the exercise. The second page has a lot more detail on like the different commands in there. And for the activities, we kind of walk you through like very specifically, these are the things you should set up as fixed. This is what they mean. And here are the like 2 things you should be experimenting with at a time to try to make it like more manageable so that this could be taught to students without teaching them, like, they don't have to have any knowledge of NetLogo at all. They don't need to ever code in it. And they don't really need an understanding of agent-based modeling. Of course, we've also like sometimes taught this like after we've already covered or introduced the idea of agent-based modeling. And then that's a little different where we could, if we want to, like talk a bit more about how this is related. But this exercise doesn't really have to be tied to agent-based modeling at all, other than the fact that we happen to be using like a programming language that's also used for ABMs.
In addition to that, if you are interested in teaching the stochastic actor-oriented models, that's directly based on the agent-based modeling idea. So often, like we teach the arguments first, and then showing this exercise. Then they have some intuition of agent-based modeling, then introducing the stochastic actor-oriented models. Then students have a much better understanding of what that model works, because that model is actually simulating using agent-based modeling idea.
But for this tool, and then also on algorithms release platform, if the student have been then they can then this platform only show the multi-model simulation.
Exactly. Yeah, the students don't need to program or anything.
Just treat the parameters.
Yeah.
One cool use case of this is just playing around with it is that you could show, or you can get structural effects. So there's this distinction between outcome and process. So, for example, homophily could be generated by other processes like
Exactly. Yeah.
try to closure. This is really cool too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we already introduced like all the activities we have, and so any like final comments like to all the activities or any recommendation? Yeah.
Just had a quick question for the network signatures, because there's some, I looked up the Harvard Business article. Do you guys have a guide with like the actual formulas for some of the signatures? Because it's described qualitatively.
Brandon?
Yeah, so we have that in the current version of the report. If once those are like sent out, it will be kind of in an appendix at the end of the report where there's like more technical details. So that's definitely something I would maybe emphasize more if I was like embedding like the personal network report and like in like a semester long class where I'd like, if I'd already like covered the idea of like Bert's constraint, that's something I can like directly reference the connection. Whereas if I'm just doing the personal network report in like a one-off workshop at a company or with like MBA students, I might not go into the details about the signatures. But that information that's more technical should be in the appendix of the report.
I think what that suggests, your question suggests, is that in addition to having it in the report, if we have an instructor's note, that this, all the formulas should be included in the instructor's note so that you as an instructor can see it even before the students do and understand what the formulas are. But all the formulas are in there. So I think it'd be a good idea to just put it into an instructor's note or a teacher's note as the case.
I think we can put it in the participant handout, like Google Docs, so people all have.
All of you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can wrap up the.
Brendan, do you have any like wrapping up?
Yeah, let me do some quick concluding remarks. Let me set up my screen share. Sorry.
Here is video recording resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, the recording of the session.
Yeah. So,
We started a few minutes late, but not very late.
yeah. Because some of people came late. So.
I understand.
Okay, great. So let me very, very quickly go through the concluding remarks. So at the end of the slide deck, just to briefly highlight, I also put links to a couple other like really great teaching exercises that we sometimes use and have been like super helpful. So I won't go through these in detail, but there's links to all of them that I definitely recommend checking out, such as the VAX game for like kind of visualizing network interventions and network properties. The Connected Commons Agility Accelerator is a really great case study that's thinking about practical ties in organizations in a way that's kind of similar to RAD. Brooke Foucault-Wells published this really great like imaginary board of directors exercise. So I've included a citation to that. And reciprocity rings are a really cool activity for thinking about like mutual exchange and getting students to provide help or resources to one another in kind of a engaging interactive way. So those are other like helpful, like kind of interactive network teaching about networks exercises I would recommend checking out if you're interested in. And there's links to all of those in the second slide deck. So sort of concluding remarks, a big theme across like the exercises we've demonstrated is the idea of like kind of integrating teaching and research. One thing that we've noticed that's really cool is if you can like show people an interactive exercise and then also be able to describe like big picture takeaways or like kind of aggregate trends from research that relate to or mirror things that you find in the exercise, that can be really helpful for a lot of learners in terms of building that boundary between like observing something personally and then understanding like these big scale trends or patterns that we've observed in social networks and making that intuition and that connection really real. The other thing I wanted to show at the end of the slide decks, and it's linked here, is kind of just an example syllabus of how we might kind of integrate these activities in. So we might do something like My Dream Team, sort of something at like the start of a semester to help students build teams for projects, and then spread these activities out by different weeks to week, helping engage students over time. And as we introduce different concepts, kind of building in related activities into the syllabus. And that's an approach we've kind of used to success. So you can like check it out or modify the syllabus that's shared online. And big picture, kind of the way we like to, the purpose of these exercises is to really help people think about the role that they have in networks. And interactive exercises provide like kind of a good venue of not just teaching in an engaging way, but to kind of translate this idea of network thinking, of network properties, into something where participants can see how they can actually be applied in like direct personal decision-making and kind of relate them back to their day-to-day lives. So that's one of the big like benefits that we see in like these types of interactive exercises is you're taking concepts and you're making them real, you're making them concrete, and you're making them practical and demonstrating ways people can actually apply network thinking and engage with it.